Hello and welcome to your Daily Detroit, where we push Southeast Michigan's conversation forward. It's Tuesday, May 26th, 2020. I'm Jairus Days. There are two parts to today's show. First, there's progress on a proposal to allow bars and restaurants to carry out liquor in Michigan. A number of states allow it, and advocate Robin Cleveland, along with a number of others, think we should have it here. I catch up with him on what's happened since we last talked and what's next. Then, our first in-person interview in a long time. Sven had a socially distanced conversation with Lisa Nuszkowski of MoGo about bike share in Metro Detroit. The audio might sound a touch different since they had masks on, but, well, it's nothing you haven't heard before. It's an interesting chat. So let's get started after we thank our members who make this show possible, including Daniel and Brian, who joined us. It is much appreciated. Thank you. Also, thanks to Keith, who increased his contribution over the weekend. You are all very awesome, as well as all of our members. If you want to join these folks, head on over to patreon.com/dailydetroit. Let's get started. Joining me on the line is Robin Cleveland. He is the co-founder and distiller of Northern Aquavit. He's also a proponent for something that I think a lot of our listeners are very much into. Robin, welcome back to Daily Detroit. I think this is actually your third appearance, sir.
Yes, it is. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we update people on what you're working on in case they missed the first story a few weeks ago about to-go booze?
Sure. So the last time we spoke was shortly after we put out a petition addressed to the governor, Governor Whitmer, her administration, just take a look at the possibility of cocktails or packaged mixed drink, either for carry-out or delivery, preferably both, from bars and restaurants in Michigan during the pandemic and then in the time after that we're all going to be dealing with shortly upon reopening, just to consider safe distancing and safety of patrons and employees of bars and restaurants.
And how did that petition do? Because after we talked, you actually gained more signatures.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at it in the last couple of days, but it was over 6,000 last I checked.
Wow.
So pretty significant. I mean, the momentum kind of faded away a little bit once we weren't getting a lot of attention from the media, but we shifted gears a little bit towards trying to make more of an impact at a legislative level. So we weren't getting anywhere with the Liquor Control Commission, and they don't have the power to change anything anyway. So started writing our representatives, and there was some radio silence for a little while, but now we've got some hopeful news here to report, I suppose.
So what's going on?
We've got the introduction of Senate Bill 0938, which is going to be an amendment to the Liquor Control Code, which would allow packaged mixed spirit drink to go and for carryout. So delivery and carryout, basically putting spirits in line with what is now legal for beer and wine. So currently, bars and restaurants in Michigan are allowed to sell packaged beer and wine, but not any form of cocktail. Or any liquor for that matter. You couldn't even sell a manufacturer packaged mixed drink like a canned gin and tonic or something. So this would open it up for bars and restaurants to be able to sell their full inventory.
And this is not unheard of in other states, right?
No, over a dozen states, I think actually closer to 20 at this stage, have implemented some form of cocktails to go. The most recent would be Pennsylvania, which just yesterday announced. If anybody knows anything about Pennsylvania, they have one of the most strict liquor control. It's one of the most strict states in the country.
Well, it looks like this is also tied with something to do with drinking outside, which is an interesting thing as well. Kind of a little bit of a change. It seems to be necessitated by not only the pandemic, but opening things up in general and allowing bars and restaurants to serve people in a much safer manner than, say, crowding them all in the bar, because we don't know how long it's going to be until bars and restaurants can really open to full capacity.
Yeah, exactly. So there's been a lot of talk in states on the West Coast about shutting down streets and making them pedestrian only, eliminating cars and putting seating outside. It doesn't necessarily work quite as well in Michigan because we know there's weather to deal with here. So there's talk now in a separate bill that kind of goes hand in hand with this of allowing cities, municipalities to decide for themselves how they'd like to approach this. So if a city wanted to, they could designate a park or designate a downtown district to allow for open containers. So consumption of these to-go cocktails. You see that in a couple cities around the country. I think Memphis allows it, New Orleans, and then actually, I believe Toledo or Canton. I can't remember exactly, but one Ohio city recently adopted this as well. It goes hand in hand with the cocktails to go measure that's being proposed, and then obviously this would allow for safer distancing, people to kind of come and go as they please and maintain these distances and enjoy the out of doors during the summer.
Yeah, I know ideas like this have been floated around the city of Detroit for a while because there are some districts that could make a lot of sense if you close them off to car traffic and kind of make them enjoyment zones. It has been wonderful seeing around the world places like Vilnius, Lithuania, doing stuff like all these places that you would think are maybe a little off the beaten path, but they're doing some really interesting things with outdoor space and all that kind of stuff. And also, I guess, it comes to this idea of responsibility. It seems like in general, when it comes to liquor laws in the United States, it's so people understand, in case they haven't been in the booze business or the beer business, it's a patchwork of laws across a number of states, and they're all very different.
Yeah. So after Prohibition was lifted, the nationwide prohibition, everything was left in the hands of the states, and that has made things very confusing. I think the responsibility should be on the drinker to make the choice. I think responsible people will be responsible. And if you look at what's popular and accepted in countries in Europe, they're way more laid back about this kind of thing. I think that is a welcome kind of cultural shift. If we stop thinking of the consumption of alcohol as this sort of demon or like a reward for a hard day's work, and just let it be what it is and enjoy it for what it is and do it responsibly. I think the numbers in history will point to there probably being less issues with overconsumption. One study I looked at shortly after Prohibition was lifted showed that prior to Prohibition, Americans consumed 140 million gallons of spirits, and during Prohibition, that rose to 200 million gallons. That's per year. So telling people they can't do something generally doesn't work.
No, in fact, I've found over the years that it makes them want to do it more in general.
Exactly. Having healthy conversations and making alcohol consumption in general just more normalized is a good thing, in my opinion.
My dad served in Germany and Europe and in Asia in the military. And so when I was a kid, he had a very different view towards alcohol than many of my friends' parents. And it was something where I was introduced to beer at 8th grade. And, I do enjoy a good cocktail and a good beer here and there, but I feel like I had less of that, have to go all the way in phase because
right.
I knew it from an early age. It was something where it wasn't a crazy mystery of knowing what it would do to me or how bad it was. Or
right. Learning your limits.
Yep, exactly. So if people want to help you out and they want to get involved, what can they do?
The best thing you could do right now is to reach out directly to your state representatives, so members of the House and members of the state Senate that represent your districts where you live. Feel free to direct those folks to our original petition, but also be sure to bring up the bill that's introduced, Senate Bill 0938, and let them know what you think about that. And obviously, if you're in support of it, we need all the help we can get.
Robin Cleveland, distiller, co-founder of Norden Aquavit, which I must admit is one of Engineer Randy's favorite spirits. Thank you so much for your time on Daily Detroit, sir.
Thanks so much for having me back. Let's hope this goes through. We need it.
Now my colleague Sven Gustafson and his conversation with Lisa Nuszkowski of MoGo.
All right, Lisa, can we start by, can you tell us why you're doing this expansion and, the sort of the rationale behind it? And also, this is a year later than you had originally planned, right?
Yeah, so we are very excited to be expanding to additional communities. We had been approached by the city of Ferndale about 2.5 years ago now, with an interest in bringing bike share. And so it took us a little bit longer to get there due to some of the federal stipulations with some funding that we had. But now that we've met all of those and sort of sat out and wanted to see what was happening with the COVID-19 pandemic and really want to make sure that we were doing this in the safe way as possible. But very excited now to be bringing bike share to communities in southern Oakland County as well as northwest Detroit in early June.
Yeah. So 31 stations, 140 bikes, right? Are you worried at all about the timing of the launch, given that we're still kind of in the grips of the pandemic outbreak and everything?
Yeah, the timing is definitely a concern. I mean, we want people to be as safe as possible. The safety and the health of individuals in our communities are the utmost importance. We've also seen that people in Detroit have been using bike share just as much, if not more, as they would be if there hadn't been a pandemic. And I think during this time where we've all been cooped up and in our homes, I think opportunities for exercise and activity where people can stay safe distances from each other is really important. And so we're excited to be launching bike share, but doing it as safely as possible and encouraging riders to take precautions like please wear a mask, please wear gloves when you're riding, keep your distance from other riders, make sure you're washing your hands afterwards. And on our end, we're doing everything we can to keep the bikes in the station safe. So our operations team is sanitizing bikes and stations on a daily basis. So we're doing our part to keep the system as safe as possible for people. And if our riders could do the same and be our partners in that, we think bike share can be a net benefit during this time.
So you said people in Detroit have been using MoGo bike share as much, or if not more, than before. So you guys haven't really been adversely affected by the pandemic?
Initially, I think people were kind of, sitting back and waiting to see what was happening with the pandemic. It was also late March when all of this started to happen. And so the weather is still a little bit iffy in late March. But as we've gotten further into the spring and the weather has warmed up, we've seen people returning to bike share in numbers that have been just as strong in other seasons, and in some cases even stronger. So a couple of weekends ago, we had our 5th highest ridership date to date. And so that was a sign to us that people aren't scared to use bike share, but again, exercising the precautions that we're encouraging everyone to take, and then making sure our team is doing the same to keep the bikes and the stations sanitized and safe for folks. So we feel like doing those steps that people can still use bike share during this time.
Wow, that's interesting. So does that give you confidence that the expanded program here is going to be successful, despite the fact that, this is a little bit less dense and things are more spread out than they are downtown in Detroit and then the central part of the city surrounding it?
Yeah, we've always known that the use for bike share in our expansion area might look a bit different than it does in downtown Detroit. Different geographies, different use cases, but we still think that bike share can play an important role in having people navigate their communities as well as get some physical activity in. So, we're really actually excited to sit back and watch how people in expansion communities use bike share. So, we have some thoughts about how that might look based on the feedback we got from the community engagement and the online station siting process that we did. But we're really excited to see how people use it and learn from that and adapt the system in a way that continues to best serve what people's needs are in the communities we're expanding to.
And the system here will operate by the same membership and fees and everything as the main system downtown?
Yep, everything will be the same. All of the equipment is interchangeable. So if you happen to be using the system in the city of Ferndale, for example, you can use that in Northwest Detroit. You can use that in downtown Detroit. It will all be the same. All the pass and pricing is the same for the system as well. And we're excited to be announcing some pass and pricing changes in a couple of weeks.
So you could feasibly check out a bike from here in Ferndale or one of the other locations and ride it down to Detroit, downtown?
Yeah, it's something that you could do. We typically focus on bike share as serving shorter distance trips. And so if you're coming from kind of the northern part of our expansion area all the way down to the river, for example, in Detroit, it's quite a trek. But we think bike share could be used in combination with other modes of transportation, whether that's the bus, whether that's a personal vehicle. And so you can not only use bike share within your own communities, but in the other communities as well, whether you're using a bike to get there, whether you're using a bus, whether you're using a car. We try to make it as flexible as possible.
June 4th is your launch for this expanded program. Anything planned in terms of like celebration or anything like that?
Yeah, so prior to the pandemic, we were planning a big launch event to celebrate this. There's a lot of excitement, not only from MoGo's side, but the communities that we're expanding to. But, unfortunately, the pandemic hit and safety is our top priority. So bringing together a large group of people is not what we want to be doing right now. So instead, we're putting together a video that will come out on June 4th, really celebrating the partnership with our communities. As well as we've been doing live streams of the stations being installed in each community. So people get a chance to see what that looks like. And we're really kind of, watching for what's coming out from the state of Michigan, as well as Oakland County, Wayne County, and the city of Detroit on additional guidance about the types of gatherings we can have going forward. So as we move into summer, we may see things like some of our street skills classes or other programs that we offer. But right now, safety is our top priority, so we're going to keep people from congregating, but the system will go live on June 4th, and people will start to be able to use bike share then. So right now what we're doing is installing the stations. We'll test them over the next week or so, and then the system will go live on June 4th.
All right, that's all for us today. We have some neat news to tell you about tomorrow when Sven joins us. And I hope you had the best possible Memorial Day weekend. I'm Jairus Days. Take care of each other, and we'll get through this together.